Well, because the clinic room is on the back of the house and it has its own entrance, there is an element of when I close the door on it, I close the door on it. I think it's even more important when you work from home that you actually do set those sort of clear boundaries. Don't worry that constant of like, oh, you know, how am I going to get more business in? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Because sometimes you just need to sit on things and let them work themselves out and be realistic. You know, just because you've got your license and your membership from the British Acupuncture Council and your insurance is all in place and you've got this amazing clinic space, doesn't mean to say that people are going to phone you straight away. You've just got to hold your own and be sure that it will work out okay.
Welcome to Acupuncture West London, the podcast. This is the podcast for students, practitioners and enthusiasts of classical Chinese philosophy, Chinese medicine and acupuncture. I'm your host, Ben Carrigan, coming to your ears all the way from London. So join me as we dive deep down the rabbit hole of Chinese philosophy and into the very concepts that inform our practice. Each episode focusing on a specific topic and its application within a clinical setting. This episode is brought to you courtesy of our brand new ebook, Yin and Yang. What are Yin and Yang? What are the laws of Yin and Yang? And how are they used as defining principles for our very existence? To answer these questions and more, download your free copy at acupuncture-westlondon.com/free ebook. Welcome to episode 5. So today we're continuing with part 2 of my conversation with Rachel Marks of Oakridge Acupuncture. As part of our A Year in Business series, Rachel is talking us through a year in business and setting up her own practice from home. In part 1 of our conversation, or episode 4, we discussed factors in deciding to set up a home clinic, the considerations of running a clinic from home, the pros and cons of setting up and working from a home clinic, evaluating your market, researching other practitioners within your locale, pricing and the importance of backing yourself, online, so things like building your website and creating an online presence, social media, search engine optimization or SEO, backlinks and lots more. We discussed building a network of patients from scratch, the importance of networking online and offline, advertising, but particularly having realistic expectations and being true to yourself. If you haven't checked out part 1, I suggest you go back and check out episode 4. There's lots of great stuff in there. Okay, let's get stuck into part 2. I hope you enjoy it. So let's talk very briefly about GDPR compliance. So what I was going to say was we're not experts on GDPR compliance. So the best thing probably is for people to look this up online.
Absolutely.
Because I'd be afraid to say something about this and to be misinterpreted or to misinterpret something myself.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I've had people help me set up to make sure I'm compliant. People just need to make sure from their own perspective.
Yeah, and I think the British Acupuncture Council actually have a wealth of information out there. And I know that they have GDPR guidelines.
Okay, that's good. I didn't realize they had them on the site, so that's good to know.
Yeah. So they have guidelines that that you can look at. It's all these little legal things that you need to be really aware of, isn't it? And,
that's it, yeah. Because I know there's you can have paper copies. You know, I guess for example, you can have them in filing cabinets as long as they're locked, or you can have encrypted files on a computer or something. But there are guidelines for that, and they're strict. And then there's the other aspect of your sharing files between practitioners. You need to, factor that in because you can't have people's names on things.
Yeah.
So I guess you have to put codes in the files to replace any of their data.
Yeah. And also I think you have to, maybe it's going off the GDPR a little bit, but also, that telling your patients what you're going to do with their information. Yeah,
that's very important.
Yeah. So when my patients come in, I do have a form that I ask them to sign. And on it will say things like, I don't share any of your information with any third parties unless I contact you and ask for your permission. I am old school. Everything I have is paper files. So as you can imagine, I'm in that locked cabinet sort of scenario. There's lots of things on that consent form. So there was a little bit about what I do with their information on there, which I think is really important.
Yeah. It is important. I have the same. I'm quite clear on my intake sheet exactly what that data is going to be used for and that I don't share it with anybody else. And even things like I have a box that people can tick if they want the newsletter, because sometimes you have a box where they say, tick this box if you don't want to receive the newsletter. And that, even when I see that on people's newsletters, it kind of annoys me, because I think it's better for people to tick it and have the option to sign into something as opposed to be signed in by default, in a way, for something like that.
Yeah.
People get contact from you and they say, I didn't sign up for this. So it's important that people know exactly what their information is going to be used for.
Definitely.
It comes back to that trust thing. If you're sending them, using their information to send them stuff or do whatever, you can break people's trust very easily and make them feel like you're serving your own interests and not theirs. Very important.
Yeah, I think the housekeeping part is really important. So I get my patients to sign a form, and there's lots of things on there, from what my cancellation terms are to, what the GDPR is to the,
Yeah, that's a good thing to touch on, actually, is cancellation policy, because I am quite strict about my cancellation policy, because I kind of feel, well, if I've got a slot or whatever and someone just doesn't show up, I mean, I'll always reschedule them if they have a reason. Or if they call me, I tend to try and be as understanding as possible. But if people don't show, I'm fairly ruthless about enforcing
that's interesting.
What would your take be on that?
Well, I do have a cancellation policy, but again, I'm a little bit old school. So I don't have on my website, there is a form that you can fill out on my website to contact me. I don't have the book now facilities. I don't have that where you can schedule your own appointment with me. You have to make contact with me, because I am one of those people that I like to have a conversation. I like to phone, if somebody fills out my online form and says, I've got, I don't know, I'm suffering from migraines and can you help me? Then, they have to fill out a telephone number and an email address. So I will make contact with them. So I phone them and say, oh, tell me more. What seems to be the problem? And I really, really like to have that. I have to have a conversation with people. So I don't have any of this, you can book your own thing. They have to book through me, because we've had that conversation. And also I feel like I'm making that personal relationship with them from the offset. And if they don't like, if I never say, you must have an appointment. But it's, after that conversation, I say, well, would you like to then book an appointment? Do you, I would like to try and help you with this or whatever. So, and touch wood, my cancellation policy has not had to be enforced.
That's great.
Because I think I've already made that contact. We've had a conversation. I send them an email. I say, oh, I'm going to send you this great big long email. Sorry about that, but it's going to tell you where to find me, where to park, what you need to wear, what to expect, how to pay, when to come, don't come because I don't have a waiting room, don't come 5 minutes before your appointment, all of these sorts of things. And because I talked to them about that before their appointment, I said, I know it's really housekeeping-y thing, but it then makes them feel more obliged to turn up. So I've touched wood, I've not actually had anybody who's made an appointment and not turned up yet.
That's really interesting. It comes back to that personal touch as well. And I suppose your clinic being at home, you want to have that connection with someone. If they're coming into your home as well,
absolutely,
you want to get a sense of somebody. That's so important.
Yeah, and ongoing patients, if they then, and of course you give them expectations, when they say, oh, well, I've had this pain in my arm for the last 6 months. Oh, well, how old are you? This is not unlikely to be treated with just one appointment. It's just sort of it's almost like setting the scene of a play, isn't it? You're setting this scenario of how things might pan out and where you're going and, what their expectations are, so that when they arrive, they are already quite clued up about where you're going and what's going to happen. I've not had to enforce my cancellation policy with any of my other patients, because when they come for the first time, they get off the bed and I say, well, I think you would benefit from having another treatment, or would you like to book one now? So I tend to do that. People, of course, things happen in people's lives and they phone up and say, I'm really sorry, Rachel, I can't make today's appointment because I've had a phone call from the school and one of my kids is sick and I've got to go and pick them up. And of course, that's absolutely fine. Let's reschedule. That's not a problem. And I wouldn't enforce the cancellation on something like that.
Yeah.
But also,
no, absolutely,
I would be really strict if I had someone who was constantly rescheduling.
Mm-hmm.
rather than cancelling. I think
Yeah.
I would probably gently steer them out of the clinic at some point, because that constantly rescheduling is as bad as a cancellation, isn't it? So
Yeah, it can be really exhausting, can't it?
yeah.
When I was starting out last May or June, I remember there were times where I was driving into clinic to see one patient, and you'd kind of turn up and you get the room ready, and then someone would call like 5 minutes before to go, I can't make it, sorry. You kind of have to let them off, because it's like, well, they should give 24 hours notice, but it's that thing where they're assuming that you're back to back. Do you know what I mean? And so you have to give certain people some leeway. But then I had another guy who didn't show up twice. So the second time I sent him an invoice and he paid it. Do you know what I mean? Which is fine.
Yeah. And you don't actually want to encourage those people. I think it's that way up, isn't it? Between, do I want to encourage this person to come back? Because things happen in lives where, we've all had that, where we've gone, oh my gosh, something's happened and I've got to reschedule or cancel, against those that just are habitual people where they just don't turn up for stuff,
Yeah.
And those aren't necessarily the patients that I particularly.
One of the things that I do have, though, is I have a booking system in place so people can book online. But with that comes confirmation emails and reminder emails, which I send out 24 hours before. And since I've had that in place, I think it's £29 a month I pay for that, for that whole system. But apart from doing my sort of accounts for me and my, sending the emails out and everything's sort of automated, it really, I really haven't had any cancellations since, or no shows, I think I've maybe had one in 6 months, which is, so for that, although people who are getting going think, God, this is an unnecessary cost, it really has saved me a huge amount of time. So it's kind of paid for itself. Things like Clinico or Timely, or there's a number of free scheduling software things. Maybe you can use Calendly or things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm all just so old school. I don't actually I've still got a paper diary.
Do you? Good stuff.
And I
love that.
I've got a paper diary. I know, God, which century did I come out from? I've got a paper diary, but I do use the calendar on my computer, actually.
Okay, so moving on to something like accounting and tax returns, which is really fun, obviously. This is the area that I die a little inside when I even say those words. But obviously you have a little bit of experience with this, but do you have anything in place to help you with this, or have you gone down this road yet? Yeah,
I have put in my tax return for 19 to 20. You can submit it, can't you, any time after, I think it was the 5th of April through to now, if you're doing it online, to the 31st of January, is it? So
you're organised. I'm very impressed.
Well, it's only because I have run a business before from home. I have been self-employed before. And it's one of those things that it's much easier to manage if you are just on it. So I put it in at the end of April, when most people are still not even contemplating it, because if there's any problems,
I fall into that bracket, just for the record.
It's much easier to get it sorted over the preceding 6 months than it is on the 2 days before your tax return's due.
Well, it's like Christmas presents, isn't it?
Yeah.
You always think of buying Christmas presents like, I'll buy them in August and I'll be all set. And you'll go to some online distributor and be all organised, and then suddenly it's like the 24th of December and you hear, oh God, not again.
I know. It is about the only thing that I am super organised over, I will say. So I do that, and there is a nice little smug feeling inside when you've done it. Let's be honest. Just go,
good, I do. I live for that smug feeling, so that's good. I must get on that right away.
But because acupuncture is the only thing that I have to, I don't work anywhere else. I don't have any other income. Acupuncture is the only thing that I'm employed at. So my tax return actually is really, really simple, and I do it myself. And
great.
And you say, do I have any tools to help me with that? Yeah, it's just a good old-fashioned spreadsheet.
Oh, really?
That's all it is. What comes in and what goes out, and this is what profit I'm making, and then rolling over to the next month. And actually, if you do that, it's actually really, really simple. It is. It took me less than an hour to do my tax return this year.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good. Because I already knew what boxes to fill out from, being self-employed before.
it is just a process, isn't it? Once you've done it, you know.
Don't be frightened of it. Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You have all the information. Like, say for instance, if you do have a paid job that you actually have your tax taken out already. From my understanding is you get a P60, don't you, at the end of the year? I think at the end of the tax year, and all you do is you use that P60 as some of your information as well. So this is where I work normally. Da 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 da, and this is what I do as self-employed. And then the tax officer will be in touch with you to tell you what additional tax you need to pay. I did a tax course with the Inland Revenue.
It's all coming out now.
Gosh, yeah. Hold on to your seats, guys. It's really exciting. So they were doing, this is going back years when I was self-employed previously and had my own little business from home. They did a free day where you could learn how to fill out your tax return as a self-employed person, and I did it. It was free, love that word. Great, free. It's a free tool. I don't have to pay an accountant to do it for me. So let me just do it for free, which I did. And it was brilliant. It was a really good day and a really good course. I don't know if they still do them, but it gave me the confidence to say I can actually do my own tax return. And, the tax office, again, they don't want you to be caught out. They want, they are there on the end of the phone, if you can get through, to say, I'm not really sure what I need to put in this box or that box. And they will hold your hand through it.
Yeah, they've been quite good, actually, because I've called them a few times for help. And, there's always that slight feeling of terror that you're going to say something that's going to dig you into some massive hole.
Yeah.
But they're always very helpful and explain things very clearly.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's move on to something I wanted to ask you about, which is, because my last career, when I was working in music, I often worked from home. I know that I used to struggle with putting barriers in place so I could divide my spare time with my work time. Mm-hmm. So have you found a way to do that, or are there any self-care tips that you have that you can talk about?
Yeah, well, because the clinic room is on the back of the house and it has its own entrance, there is an element of when I close the door on it, Yeah. So, of course, there are things like all of us, we might be sitting down having dinner with our family and all of a sudden this little idea pings into your head. And I don't think that, of like, oh, actually, for that person, I might have I thought about that, and that. And then I might go, okay, I'm just going to go off everybody whilst it's still fresh in my head to go and look something up. But yeah, I think I'm quite good at sort of separating the businessy side of it. Yeah. Because I do think the two can go hand in hand. You can have good business acumen and be a really good, caring, compassionate therapist. I don't think.
Absolutely.
I dress as well in a uniform. So I do actually wear a proper clinic tunic, and I wear some clinic trousers, so that when I do go into the clinic, I am in my mindset of I am going to be treating people today and this is what I'm going to be doing. And
I think that's super important.
Yeah. So I have it sets me up in the right mindset. I'm going to, put my hair up and do what I need to do. I go into the clinic, make sure everything's as it is before my first patient of the day, just make sure that I'm grounded and that everything's, in place and clean. And, I've done all the care that I need to do cleaning wise, my clinic. Yeah. And I think I've then put on maybe some soft music or something, depending on my mood of the day. If I think I need a bit of energizing, I'll put something on that's a bit more energetic. If I think I'm a little bit woo in my head, I'll put something a little bit more grounding on. And I just spend a few minutes in the clinic getting involved in my space. And I find that really works for me.
Yeah, it's true. Because when I used to work from home, as I was saying, I used to find that if I got up in the morning, I couldn't just go straight into a room and start work. I had to, do the usual, have a shower, put on clean clothes, but I always had to put on my shoes because I didn't feel like I was working unless I had my shoes on, which was kind of funny because my wife Annette has this thing where she doesn't like people wearing shoes in the house. So I had a pair of house shoes. So for me, it's like, I don't feel like I'm working if I'm in slippers or, no one's going to see me all day. So I could be in my pajamas or anything, but I have to feel like I'm going to work. And sometimes that might even just be going out the front door and coming back in again. Yeah. Actually, going back to what you were saying about, writing notes or going off and looking at something during dinner, I often find I have a little piece of paper beside the bed, or, so because often I wake up at 3 a.m., the witching hour, and have an idea about something. And I find it hard to go back to sleep if I'm not able to put it down on paper. So I might just write a little note, or even just do a squiggle or something, just so that it reminds me in the morning
I do that too.
Of whatever I do. And it's important. But then sometimes it's, you might look at that, what you've written in the morning, go, oh, I don't know what I was thinking, whatever. But sometimes you can think, actually, no, that's really interesting. I must think about that further.
Interestingly, I've always done that, even before acupuncture. I've always had a pen and notepad in my bedside drawer, so that in the middle of the night, if there's something in particular that either I need to get out of my head and down on paper, I find that is so therapeutic for me. Or even if it's just, it's those stupid things like, oh my gosh, I must remember to put, I don't know, breakfast cereal on the shopping list. That would be the thing that will wake me at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I've been the same. I have to put it down. It's like I'm holding it until I put it down on paper. Yeah. It can be really exhausting, when you feel like you're trying to remember something, and you probably won't forget it anyway. No. But it's just, you just get it down on paper, and then you can move on or go back to sleep.
Do you think that might be a spleeny earthy type thing?
I think it might be spleen and earth, yeah. Yeah. For those listeners out there, we're both spleen and earth in the stems and branches context. So look it up. It's too long an episode to go into now.
Let's not get into that.
One thing I was going to say was just about separating work life from home life. Because I found that I was starting to get emails and phone calls and out of hours text and whatnot, whether it be on WhatsApp or Facebook or all sorts of mediums that I didn't even think people would contact me on, really. I have become quite militant in never responding to work emails or phone calls out of hours. So I have an autoresponder set up for emails and for WhatsApp and whatnot, just because it can sound a little bit harsh, but I feel it's important to set clear boundaries.
Absolutely. I agree.
Not just for your patients, but for me as well, because I know that if someone texts me on a Sunday, I will think about it on a Sunday, but I don't want to think about it on a Sunday because I want to spend that time with the net, because otherwise I'll go into work on Monday and be exhausted. Yeah. And everyone needs that time out.
Definitely, and I think it's even more important when you work from home that you actually do set those sort of clear boundaries. Like I say, I always close the clinic door. I don't respond to emails. Again, it really does depend. I might read them, or I might just send a very, very short one back just saying, thanks for your email. I've acknowledged it, but I'll be in touch with you on Monday. Monday morning, I'll give you a little call or something, just so they know you've acknowledged it, but without going into any sort of detail. And again, it depends again on where I'm at, because having run a business from home before, I used to find being in events, you're dealing with most of my most of my clients were brides. So, and the run up to a wedding, you would be getting all sorts of texts and messages like at 3 o'clock in the morning, because they'd obviously woken up worried about something and they just need to get it out, So, I found that the boundaries for this have been easier than the boundaries I had for that previous.
Right, yeah. No, well, that's it. And it does take its toll on you. I think you can really burn yourself out if you'd never have that chance to switch off. So it's important to make clear boundaries. But also, I remember in the first few months of setting up my clinic, where you feel like you have a few patients and you feel like you really need to nurture them. There's that temptation of, if I don't respond, I'll lose them or they'll go somewhere else. But you kind of have to hold your ground with that, because if you set that up from the start where you're responding on a Sunday or at 10 o'clock at night, I just feel it's a slippery slope. We both know that we want to be the best possible practitioners we can be, and I love treating people. We are a business as well, and so we have to have professionalism. Yeah. I don't think we ever should apologize for being a business as well, because I think that's something that us practitioners can forget very easily, that we're a business or that we're trying to make our own living or that we're working in that capacity. So I think it's important to remember that too.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything wrong in having those boundaries, for sure. I am quite strict about that sort of thing. But it depends on the patient, because if it's one of my long-standing patients, I do have a few patients that have been with me almost from the start. And I've got to know them really well over the last year. And if they're contacting me at 10 o'clock at night, it's it could be a very different reason for, say, another patient. So I think it depends on who the patient is as to how I potentially would respond. But
yeah.
But then, my long-standing patients aren't the type of patients, unless it's really urgent, to do that sort of thing at 10 o'clock at night,
So I guess you've been in practice about 12 months now. So have you any pitfalls that may have occurred that may be useful for new practitioners to be aware of or to look out for, or any lessons that you've learned?
I think you've got to really just be true to yourself and just be confident that you are in this place that is going to take you to other amazing places. And it's not, I think I would say, don't worry of that constant of like, how am I going to get more business in? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Because sometimes you just need to sit on things and let them work themselves out and be realistic, I guess. Just because you've got your license and your membership from the British Acupuncture Council and your insurance is all in place and you've got this amazing clinic space, doesn't mean to say that people are going to phone you straight away. You've just got to hold your own and be sure that it will work out okay.
And it's so important as well, because I remember when we graduated, there's that sense of almost like knowing what you don't know, but forgetting what you do. And we've all been studying for, say, 3 years or however long. We all know so much, to a level that we do work off our instincts and we can treat people well.
Yeah.
But there still can be that lack of confidence. And particularly in a situation where a patient says, how many treatments do I need for this? Which is the famous one. And it is a how long is a piece of string question. And that can only come with experience. It's not something that you can, say, oh, well, this will take 5 treatments or whatever. So you do kind of have to manage people's expectations and say, well,
I think
let's try 3 treatments and we'll have a discussion at the end of that or something like that. And also, I remember even in our final exams last year or the year before, where you have things like you're trying to juggle so much information in terms of diagnosis, and you're looking at the abdomen and skin color and people's nails and then the pulses and then the case history, and you just totally spin yourself out. And I think the best advice I've ever got, and everyone will have different ways of looking at it, but a guy, my sort of guru that I work with, who's been working for 35 years, every single time without question that I've gone to him and said, oh, well, this person has this and this, he only asks me one question. So I've actually almost stopped asking at this point. He just says, what does the pulse say? So sometimes you just need to bring it back to the basics. And if the pulse is racing or whatever, sometimes you don't need to feel all the qualities at that particular moment. If it's racing and they're lying down, there's heat. So, focus on that. And just, you don't need to fix this person in one. Yeah, you can't fix someone in one treatment, or very rarely. So bring it back to basics, try and clear that heat and then go, okay, well, once I've done this, then I'll move on to the next thing. Yeah. And I think that was the best lesson I learned in my first year, was just to trust that kind of instinct of, okay, let's just take the pulse.
And also, just trust yourself, because I remember Deborah saying, always bring it back to basics. If you're not sure, just bring it back to basics. Is it yin? Is it yang? So back to the 8 confirmations and just go, oh, okay. And I still remind myself of that. I do remind myself of that on a regular basis, because sometimes you can see these things and you could actually make up this story and it can be really a very good story. But actually, when you look at it in very basic terms, there are things that you've missed or you've overcooked.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes the simplest, isn't it? The simplest treatments are the ones that work the best.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. Because I remember in clinic, I'd have like 5 different ideas or 20 points that I wanted to use. And now I think the best treatments I've done are probably where I might use 3 needles. Yeah. And you do have people who come in and kind of go, is that it? Do you know what I mean? Only 3 needles. But you'll go, well, it's a clear message to the body. And you want it to be a clear message, because if you're letting them lie on the couch like Hellraiser with 50 needles sticking out of their head or their body or whatever, it's sending mixed messages. Theoretically speaking, and it's difficult. And even coming back to the yin and yang thing, which we've discussed this before, has always been an issue for me, because I remember in clinic I used to get totally tied up in knots about yin and yang deficiency or which one to treat. But it's never quite that simple, because as I touched on in the last episode, Yang creates yin and yin supports yang, and neither can exist without
That's
the other.
right.
So if you feel it's yang deficiency, then work on yang, and one will have an effect on the other. And if you're wrong, they might feel worse. And then you go, okay, well, now I've learned something. We can't be perfect with every treatment. It has to be a learning process all the way.
Yeah. Another thing I would say is, like, when you're working on your own, I don't have officially a mentor, but I think in early practice, it's really good to have someone, whether that's online or whether it's someone that you are working alongside, that actually can be that mentor for you. Working on my own, that's the one thing that I would say that I probably miss. So I listen to quite a few podcasts, and I listen to, I'm often reading my notes that we learned when we were in uni, because, there's such a wealth of information, but it's still not the same as having somebody that you could potentially go down the corridor to.
I'm still emailing our tutors that we had in ICOM quite frequently and bothering them with various questions because, and even in clinic, I ask questions quite a lot, and it does one of two things. It either teaches me something new that I go, oh, that's interesting, or else often it can have the effect of just confirming something that you knew already, but you just kind of may have doubted or maybe put somewhere else in the back of your mind, or, so yeah, it's a real benefit for confidence and for learning. Yeah. So I guess the last question I wanted to ask you was, I guess we have to touch on it with the times we're living in, how COVID-19 has affected your practice.
So, and I can only talk from my own personal experience on this, but yeah, I mean, I was devastated that, and it was the right thing to close my clinic. But also by that time, when was that? At the beginning of March, was it?
I think it was the 23rd of March, I think, was when we went into lockdown. 23rd
of March. So yeah, so March for me was already quite a quiet month. I think already people, I know like some of my elderly patients, they're over 70, they were already shielding, weren't they, 2 weeks before the rest of us were expected to go into some sort of lockdown. So some of my patients had already started to tail off, and already I was getting a little bit twitchy, I suppose, on some of my patients that had some long-term medical conditions, So really, when we were said, no, definitely, we need to, stop treating it, in some respects, it was a real shame, but also it was a little bit of relief that someone had actually taken that responsibility away from me.
Yeah.
I don't know how other people would feel, but that sort of, it was like, oh, okay. And then I spent probably about 4 weeks of fallout of thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to get my clinic back up and running? I've been going for 9 months at that point, probably.
Yeah.
And it was starting to gather some sort of momentum as well. I've had to hold the faith that it's going to be okay. There will be some of my patients that will come back, and there'll be some patients that won't, and that new patients will come through. I do feel like I might be starting at the beginning again, but it's not really. Those are on my down days of, oh no, hands in head.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm starting all over again. But actually, I'm not starting again. And
I suppose the only thing that I take some solace in is that we're all in this together. I've always sort of kept in touch with, the British Acupuncture Council guidelines and Public Health England. But regardless of what they said, I kind of decided myself that I was going to close the clinic and make these decisions on a weekly basis on what we feel is right for ourselves and for our patients. And there's still a lot we don't know. But I guess that the thing is, working from home must have a little bit, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but because the room is there and it's in the house, that must be a little bit of a relief, just in comparison with, one of the clinics I was working in has shut now because of the overheads. Yeah. I think we're just too great for a new clinic in its first year to get through,
I agree. I mean, I'm in a fortunate position that my clinic space is in my house. So other than obviously paying a little bit on the mortgage, it really, it hasn't impacted me in the ways of, thank goodness I didn't have a shop front. I think to myself, crikey, if I had a high street clinic. And I'm not going to lie, I've actually, in some respects, quite enjoyed it because, when we finished last year after studies, I felt like I was on a different treadmill I got off of one treadmill onto another treadmill of trying to get my clinic up and running and get my business going. And I don't think I took into consideration actually the amount of energy I'd actually spent on just the study. And I think, you get back on this other, I step from one treadmill onto another, and the anxieties seem to follow, if that makes sense, And they're just new anxieties. Am I going to get a patients? And once it was all taken away from me and I'd actually got over that slightly grieving process of I actually really missed treating people and my business was just getting going, and I realised that actually I'm in quite a good position, I have been very kind to myself. I've done lots and lots of things that I've wanted to do. My garden is looking the best it's ever looked.
Great.
And all the things that I really love, like walking, I do a lot of walking, so I just do more of that. And yeah, it's been okay. And I'm just, there's part of me that actually has quite enjoyed it because it's forced me to take stock. When really I maybe should have done that last summer.
I could totally relate to that.
So if there's another little bit of advice for new practitioners, is if you are in that position, which I know is a fortunate position of you don't have to get on the new treadmill straight away, don't, because I don't think you realise or you don't appreciate actually how much physically and mentally and emotionally your body has been through.
I totally agree.
So I feel like I've done some recovery, if that makes sense, over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And I just...
I'm totally agree with you. I think for me, I remember, when was it? Was it March 2019 we handed in our dissertations? And I think I had cold sweats for about 6 months after that at night time and dreams of not getting in on time and just the sense of trauma about the whole thing. But it takes its toll. So although it's quite stressful for everyone at the moment, I think you can't do anything else but just try and take the time out, which is, it's easy for me because I quite like being at home and I quite like my own space, but, it can be quite confrontational as well for others and affects everyone in different ways.
I mean, I must admit, I've been really fortunate, I don't have a young family. My family are all teenagers and young adults. So, apart from my son having to do some school, his schoolwork, and he's super motivated at doing that anyway, luckily, I feel very fortunate actually that this has happened to us, or in this time of my life, rather than if I'd had 3 kids under 5, which would have been a potential nightmare actually, or trying to run my clinic from home with little kids and being furloughed and all those sorts of things. It must be horrendous, really, really stressful.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm so happy you came on the show and we've been chatting for quite a while now. I've asked you lots of questions.
That's all right. And it's been lovely speaking to you. And I've really enjoyed the process.
Okay, so before we wrap up today's episode, as I've mentioned previously, one of the key components of our podcast is to hear your feedback and to receive your questions. Again, I'm so happy that so many of you are continuing to get in touch and that you're asking such great questions. So let's get stuck into a few more of these. Josh got in touch to say that it'd be great to do an episode or a series clarifying the key differences between classical Chinese acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. So I'll definitely have a think about doing this over the next couple of weeks and how I might be able to put this together. It's a really great question. One of the things I will say ahead of time, though, is that I'm not going to be pitting one against the other. They're both great modalities of treatment, perhaps just with a slightly different format. Different cars with the same engine, perhaps. Josh also said that he loved our first episode on yin and yang, and among other things, it had helped inspire him to hopefully take the plunge and study acupuncture. So this is actually, for me, this is the ultimate compliment and is really the most humbling thing to hear. So I'm really grateful for you sharing that, Josh. Thanks. Next, Jenny got in touch asking about the best options for managing clinic bookings, accounts, patient notes, etc. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, I bit the bullet pretty early on into setting up my clinic last year, and I signed up for an online platform called Clinico. I've actually never looked back, to be honest. It's £29 a month, which I know can seem like a lot when you're starting up, but in all honesty, the amount of time you save with accounts, booking and changing appointments, confirmation and reminder emails or texts, it pays for itself 10 times over. And you can then put that time into other things. So it's really about what you think your time is worth. There are a number of free options like Calendly or something along those lines. But again, it comes back to that old adage, you get what you pay for. There are also other paid options like I mentioned Clinico, there's Timely, Acuity Scheduling, 10 to 8, Setmore, and loads of others. In regards to taking credit card payments, sending out payment links to patients, etc., there are also a load of other options out there too. Personally, I use iZettle, as the card reader looks slicker and it's more sturdy than the others I've used. Others I've used in the past are PayPal here and SumUp, but I didn't really like these as much, but that's just my personal opinion. The good news is that many of these options offer free trials or discounts for signing up. To get these, check out our show notes page for this episode. Over the past few months, I've been busy setting up affiliate links for all these options. So to avail of all sorts of trials and discounts, just go over to our show notes page, acupuncture-westlondon.com/podcast, and check out the show notes for episode 4 at the bottom of the page. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks so much again to Rachel Marks for joining me today. If you'd like to learn more about Rachel and her Horsham-based home clinic, Oakridge Acupuncture, check out oakridge-acupuncture.co.uk. For questions about today's episode, again, I'd love to continue to hear from you, so get in touch at podcast@acupuncture-westlondon.com. Finally, don't forget to check out the show notes at acupuncture-westlondon.com/podcast. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. To keep up to date with all of our upcoming episodes, sign up to our podcast newsletter. By doing so, you'll get your very own copy of my brand new ebook, Yin and Yang. Check out acupuncture-westlondon.com/free ebook. See you next time.